Welcome everybody. It's such wonderful to see everybody and to know that we're gonna have a lot of fun together. And we're definitely so pleased to have Mark and Heidi join us and Norma May and Edward and those who were not with us originally in Oxford for our second tour. So last time I spoke about Prague. And this time I want to talk a little bit about Vienna, but I also want to leave time to go over the schedule of the trip. So we'll have time for that as well, and then answer any questions you've got. So just to start with a little bit of a comparison, Prague is very much we might call a community that was very pious, very religious. It really valued its synagogues and has a medieval community that goes back to the 12th century, and those synagogues in Prague are still there. And although there are newer ones as well, there's a lot of history in Prague. But the Czech community was not only about Prague, it was also about the rural communities outside of Prague. And we'll definitely be going to see at least one of those. So the difference is enormous between that and Vienna. If you know any Viennese Jews, you'll know they're not pious, they're not religious. Viennese Jews are cultural, they're intellectual, they're secular, assimilationist. And of course, I'm talking in generalities. There is only a couple of synagogues in Vienna now, today, these days. And that's partly because of the Holocaust. But there were never a lot of synagogue-going Jews in Vienna. People didn't go to Vienna to be more religious. They went um, doctors and lawyers and intellectuals and journalists. And if you've had a look at the book, What Vienna Has Done for the World, you'll know how much of a contribution Viennese people and Viennese Jews particularly have done and have contributed to civilization, Western civilization, culture, musicians, architects, sculptors. That's what Viennese Jews are all about. So, slightly different story than the one we have in Prague. And this is particularly, I suppose, symbolized by the pictures of the old synagogues that tragically are no longer there. This was a synagogue in the old Jewish district, which we're going to talk about. It's called Leopoldstadt, the town of Emperor Leopold, but this is where the Jewish quarter resides. And these beautiful Baroque synagogues of the 18th and 19th century really marked the culture and the fashion rather than the devotion and the piety of the Jews who lived there. So the Jews came to Vienna around the 12th. They came again not as farmers or peddlers as they did in Prague, but they came as merchants and bankers. And they were taken on by the court, by the kings, in order to really develop the economic future of the early um, part of what we now call Austria, that eventually became the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That empire was huge, and you'll see how far it went. It was ruled by one family for almost 1,000 years, the Habsburg family, and you'll see there in the middle, number 8, that's the center, that's Vienna. And no, north of that, you'll see Prague, which of course is part now of Czechoslovakia, but was then Moravia and Bohemia. And next to that was Slovakia, number 9. You'll also see number 6, that's now what we call the Ukraine, part of the Ukraine and part of Poland. That's number 16, the huge mass there is Hungary, capital of Budapest. And then you go west, to a little bit of Switzerland, 13 and 15, and then down south towards Italy, number 7, and Slovenia, number 3, all the way down to all the Slavic lands. That's the old Yugoslavia. That's, of course, Croatia, Bosnia, Herzegovina, um, all the way down to the Mediterranean. It was a huge empire, and this one empire held everyone together for so long. And Jews were present in all parts of the empire, and they were one body, if you like. They were considered one national entity, a minority, of course, but they were considered one group. And even though they were in different countries, they spoke different languages, there were different cultures, different dress. The Jews, in a sense, encompassed them all. And that was one easy way for the emperors to make sure that their finances were collected, their taxes were collected, that they could rely upon the Jews to do trade across the national boundaries and the cultural boundaries. And the Jews were a very, very useful part of the empire. Now, of course, on the one hand, the Jews had to suffer the persecutions that came with being Jewish in Christian Europe, particularly in the early medieval period. So we're talking about the 13th and the 14th century. At that time, there were probably about 1,000 Jews in Vienna. And like many Jews elsewhere, they were expelled. There was a pogrom, and Jews were killed and sent away from uh, Vienna to other parts of the empire and even outside of the empire. We then have the Jews return. We Jews, we keep coming back. We never take anything lying down. And by the 16th century and the 17th century, Jews were back in Vienna and they were growing. And this time they decided to live in one area of the of Vienna, and this became part of an area of Vienna that was called Leopoldstadt, and it's the old Jewish quarter. Now, if you look at the town of Vienna, you'll see here the river that flows through the middle. Then you'll see this whole area here. This is the Leopoldstadt area, the old Jewish quarter. And then as you go round further south and west, you'll come to what's called the Ringstrasse. This is the ring road or the outer ring of Vienna, and this is where the palaces and the museums and the parliament is. And this Ringstrasse goes all the way around back to the river. So as the city grew, the poor Jewish quarter was up here, and then gradually the um, citizenry moved out to this more affluent area over here. Our hotel is down here on the Ringstrasse. So we're very much going to be centered in the tourist center, in the tourist area where most of the attractions of Vienna, current Vienna, are. So in order to go into the Jewish quarter, we will have to go back to the river and back to the Jewish quarter when we do our walking tours. Um, the the old Jewish quarter, um, has now become taken over by other groups and other cultural organizations, and we'll see how it's been transformed. Um, so Vienna was becoming a home for Jews again in the 1600s, particularly in this area of Leopoldstadt. And gradually and slowly, the Jews became more and more wealthy. The empire relied upon their financial acumen, and you began to get these all enormously wealthy and affluent families who then opened up these huge mansions along the river, which became um, the almost like the Newport, Rhode Island of Vienna. Every house was bigger than the next one, or you might think of Fifth Avenue in New York or any other kind of street that was beginning to become more and more affluent. And the families who lived there were the Oppenheimers, the Sassoons, the Wertheimers, the Aguilars. Um, Famously in the book, the hair with the golden, what's the name of the book?
Hair with the amber eyes.
Thank you, the hair with the MRIs. There's a family there that are also one of those great families of Vienna Jews. And they were very wealthy. They were all merchants. They were all in finance. And they helped the emperor with making sure the finances of the empire were secure. Some of them even became court Jews. They were allowed into court. They were ennobled, brought into the nobility. And by the time we get to 1750, we have an amazing um, change of history in that Frederick II, the Emperor of the Hungarian Austrian Empire, sorry, Joseph II, the Emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, decides to emancipate all the Jews in the empire, not just the wealthy Jews in Vienna, but all of the Jews in the empire. Every Jew from that moment on is a citizen of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And although there are some restrictions and limitations on the kind of occupations Jews are allowed to go into, and the universities and other parts of life that Jews have some restrictions on, by and large, the Jews are the first group in the empire to be emancipated and the first empire to emancipate them, even before Napoleon did in the French Revolution. So we're getting to an enormous picture of Jewish life that is prosperous, it's wealthy by and large, but not, of course, for everyone. There are certainly poor Jews. And what is happening is that as Jews hear about what's happening in Vienna, Jews move from the suburbs, not the suburbs, the rural areas of Galicia, of Hungary, of Romania. They come into Vienna, into Austria, and suddenly you have this multi-cultural Jewish population who are in Vienna, which is not so much favored by the Viennese. They don't really like these poor Jews coming in, speaking Yiddish, which is unfamiliar to Viennese Jews who are now all German speaking. And there is definitely anti-Semitism that begins to surge a couple of times. First of all, in the 18th century, when there is definitely a kind of a pushback against these Jews coming into open society. And then you will get another resurgence of anti-Semitism, of course, in a big way in the 20th century. But by and large, it's a trajectory towards prosperity and affluence and normal life, emancipation, such that the Jews now can become part of Western civilization. Now, there's a good thing and a bad thing about that because Austrian Jews don't do anything by halves. So they grab on to this emancipation. And what we now call the Haskalah in Hebrew, which means enlightenment, becomes the center of Jewish life in Austria. And with the Haskalah comes what we call assimilation. And perhaps the Viennese Jews, of all European Jews, became the most assimilated, which means to say that they would often intermarry. They would divest themselves of all religious dress. They no longer attended synagogue. They kept a pride in their Jewish identity, but it no longer had an outward look. And gradually, of course, over the generations, many either converted to Christianity or just left Judaism altogether. If you wanted to do well, if you wanted to go to the Viennese music school or to the opera house or to the university, you probably converted to Christianity just to make your path a little easier. So with this opportunity to become part of Western life came the attractions and the temptations of civil assimilation, and that of course, began to really diminish the Jewish community as a community who were connected to Jewish life. We do get, however, by the 1920s, we have over 200,000 Jews living in Vienna. Now, many of those would be intermarried. Many of those would may no longer have anything to do with Judaism, but might still identify as having one person who was Jewish. Through that time, we would have had um, Viennese Jews who were jurists and journalists and lawyers, as I said, surgeons, the cream of the cream of Austrian society, not always accepted in the best clubs or the best hotels. You can imagine perhaps what it was like, perhaps a bit like America in the 1950s. Um, Not accepted everywhere, but generally, certainly by the state, were considered to be part of Jewish life. Now, in terms of the religious community, Jews, of course, this is the Jewish quarter in Leopoldstadt. This is what it looks like today. Um, you'll see these beautiful buildings um, that we will be walking through and talking about, and how they've, of course, be repurposed today. In the back of the picture, in the middle of the square, you'll see a strange looking building. This is the Holocaust Memorial and was built by British sculptor Rachel Whitehead. And we'll be talking and looking at this sculpture and talking about its symbolic significance in this place and what it's trying to show. So I'm not going to talk about that in detail because we're going to see that when we get there. But it's something that is very remarkable when you experience it. This is the Stad Temple, built in 1840, one of the only synagogues left after Kristallnacht in 1938. And this synagogue, as an Orthodox synagogue, um, was originally built that way, but over time, religious reform was needed in Austria in order to continue to attract Jews, and therefore it became what in Central Europe is called neolog. This is a movement of Judaism that's not familiar to us because we don't have it in America. But neolog Judaism is very similar to conservative Judaism. So it's just one step away from orthodoxy. It still doesn't have mixed seating. There's still seating for men and women separately, but things have changed. You can see how the ark is now at the front of the building rather than in the middle, and that the women's balcony is more accessible than it was in the old Orthodox synagogues. But it's still a traditional synagogue. It still exists. It's still in Vienna. And the Stad Temple becomes a center for Jewish life in the 19th century and one of many synagogues at the time, but as I say, the only one left standing today from that time. And out of these religious um, populations of Jews, we get an enormous amount of cultural organizations. So not just Jew as a religious person who goes to synagogue, but Jew as a sports person. So Maccabia, the sports organization you may know about, starts in Vienna. So Jews join the sports club, the Jewish sports club, and that's one way of identifying as Jewish. Or the Jewish hospital, or the Jewish orphanage, or the Jewish orchestra. There are Jewish writers, there are Jewish journalists, there are Jewish scientists. We get Jewish thinkers. We'll talk about some of these famous people in a minute. And of course, we have our own particular um, brand of being Jewish that has nothing to do with religion, and that's Zionism. And of course, as we probably all know, Zionism begins with Theodor Herzl in Vienna. And he has this idea that Jews should be a nation of their own in their own land. And again, we'll talk about him more in a second. We'll just come to the Holocaust period now. So we have a couple of 100,000 Jews in Vienna by 1938, and as we know, on the 1st of March, Hitler marched into Austria and annexed it, as the Anschluss was called. Tragically, I'm afraid to say that Austrians became more Nazi than the Germans, and that they took to anti-Semitism in a huge way, even to the point of forcing the Austrian chief rabbi of Vienna to clean the streets in front of the public. And 100,000 Jews emigrated quickly after Kristallnacht, when 42 synagogues were destroyed and many were killed. The other 100,000 Jews were eventually transported to a labor camp and then to Auschwitz, where they were murdered. So the legacy of a long and very prosperous, very cultural, very intellectual community came to an end. Vienna is now very much devoid of Jews. As I say, there is only the one temple that we're looking at, plus the Reform Synagogue that we'll talk about in a minute. It's a tragedy to an end of 1,000 years of Jewish life in the Austro-Hungarian Empire and in Vienna. And as you may know, unlike Germany, where Germany, I think, has done a huge amount of work in terms of reparations and rebuilding Jewish synagogues and building monuments to Jewish life with the Stolperstein, the little metal fixtures in the streets that we talked about last time. Austria has done very little, and there is still a feeling that in Austria, that sense of not really understanding what they did and the consequences of their actions have been understood fully. And we'll hear a bit about that when we talk to members of the Jewish community in Vienna. But Vienna is still a member of the European Union. It's a cultural capital, and certainly Jews live there very happily today. But the past still looms large. I'm going to do one more thing, and then we're going to ask you if you have any questions, and then we're going to move on to our trip. You may know, and some of you may have seen the play Leopoldstadt. Can you just indicate if you've seen it? Okay, so quite a few. So you probably know the story behind it. Tom Stoppard, the playwright, found out late in life that his family were emigres from Vienna and then Czechoslovakia. And Tom Stoppard, one of the most successful British playwrights in the 20th century, who's written, the most wonderful plays, finally wrote a play about his own life. And at the end of the play, he stands on the stage as in a character as himself, trying to understand what happened to his own family. This play, Leopoldstadt, is named after the area that we're talking about, and here we're going to hear Tom speak about it.
A new play, but I don't quite have one. And then at some point you went away and burrowed and found yourself in Vienna, which seems to me a very natural place for you to be. You've been in Vienna before with 3 adapted plays, 2 Schnitzlers and Nestroy in the 70s and 80s. What led you to Vienna this time?
It was to some degree more personal. I'm Czech, not Austrian. I was born in a town you could drive to from Vienna, but it was in Czechoslovakia.
Zlín.
Zlín, it was called, yes, Zlín. It's been at the back of my mind that it's something I've never used. It felt like unfinished business.
Those who don't know, what is it, where is it, and why is the play called it?
Leopoldstadt is the old Jewish quarter of Vienna. From very early on, it was the Jewish quarter, and at different times it became really overcrowded as bad things happened north and east, where Russia and Galicia. There were lots of refugees finding their way to Vienna because around about the 1860s, the emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire emancipated his Jews. If you were a Jew in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, you had the same rights as everybody else. Leopoldstadt was still the part of town for the poor Jews. As the Jews got more successful, a generation later, there were many baronial Jews. Some of them famous would know about the hair with amber eyes is about a family who were like Rothschild. And Schnitzler was another, Viennese Jew. Mahler was born a Jew. So Jews and culture in Vienna, they were indissoluble, really. And Leopoldstadt simply means Leopold town.
And now we're going to see a little bit of Leopoldstadt. This is the one of the opening scenes where this grand Viennese family that are identifiably Jewish, but have non-Jewish members within the family that people have married into, and convert Jews who have converted out of Judaism to the Catholicism, and they're all part of this one family, and they're all on the stage at the beginning, and it's Christmas time, and they're joking around about not only about the who's in the family and all the different varieties of Jews they have in the room, but also those Jews who they came from. So they talk about their grandparents who are still living in the old quarter, although now they're living in the very nice new quarter of Vienna. For those who remember the play, this is early on.
You're not looking!
Is that right?
Oi!
It's a beautiful star, darling, but it's not the star we put at the top of our Christmas tree.
I'll find it. I know which one it is.
What's wrong with it?
Poor boy. Baptized and circumcised in the same week. What can you expect?
It's true, he cried both times.
I don't understand my brother.
He's just a man. He doesn't want his son to be different from him.
What are you talking about?
Foreskins. Hannah, can't you play something else?
Ask Daddy. With my Powley, it's simple. We're Jews. Bad Jews, but pure-blood sons of Abraham. And Ludwig's parents wouldn't have anything to do with us if their grandson didn't look Jewish in his bath. In fact, if I'd had myself Christianized like Hairman, Ludwig wouldn't have married me. Would you? Be honest.
I would when they were dead.
Is that a compliment?
Honour thy father and thy mother. I didn't mean that the way it sounded. And Ernst, of course. Mathematics is the only language in which you can make yourself clear, I find. Vilma, you really ought to come to Mama and Papa's for Seder this year with Ernst and the girls, naturally.
I should. It might be her last year.
You and Gretel too, of course. It would be nice for the cousins to do Seder together.
I'll come. What happens at Seder?
You seem to think becoming a Catholic is like joining the jockey club.
It's not unlike, except that anyone can become a Catholic.
You're snobby about Granny and Grandpa Yakubovich, Hairman, if I may say so.
I?
Yes, you. You're snobby about their accents and using Yiddish words and dressing like immigrants from some village in Galicia, except they're still there, keeping the village shop. There's too much of the shtetl about them for you.
That's not being snobby, it's being snobby. Yes, I admit it.
Okay. I hope that was fun to watch again. Okay, so some famous personalities from Vienna. The most famous of all, probably, everybody knows Sigmund Freud. I don't think I need to say a word about what he was famous for. You know, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. And of course, we know that he died in London, and they took his studio from his what's it called? The meeting room, the conference room. No, what was it called? The something room, the
Consultation room or something.
Therapy room.
The therapy room. They took it from Vienna, and when he emigrated, they had enough time to basically dismantle the room and take it with them to London, and then reestablished it there. So he felt very much part of the same environment he'd been in. He was very reluctant to leave Vienna. He felt very Viennese. He felt very much connected to. He couldn't believe what was happening. Basically, it was his daughter who got him to leave, Anna, and she without her, she would never have, and his students, she would never have got him out. And he managed, of course, to do a lot of work after the war, and thank God that he did survive. But his theories were considered not Aryan and were prescribed. Of all the famous psychotherapists, the only one, Adler and all the others, the only one who was not Jewish was Jung, who was Swiss.
By the way, well, his point may have been that a cigar sometimes is only a cigar. I think he died of laryngeal cancer. So a cigar, being a cigar may not have been such a good thing for him.
That's a Groucho Marx allusion.
Yeah, right.
His granddaughter, Sophie Freud, died just a couple of years ago, and she lived in Boston and taught at Simmons School of Social Work for many years. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. And there was another relative in Cambridge.
Ah, great. Good to know. Theodor Herzl, again, I don't think I have to say much about him, the founder of Zionism. He was a journalist. He saw what was happening in France with Dreyfus and the anti-Semitism that we talked about earlier, and the fact that Dreyfus was considered a spy, but was falsely accused and was considered by the French population as not as a spy, but a Jewish spy, and therefore, by definition, someone who would betray their country. Wouldn't all Jews betray their country? And that led Herzl to understand that a nationalist Jewish movement was needed, created Zionism. First Zionist Congress was in Vienna, of course. But, Herzl also then got to the point where he was so desperate, particularly for Eastern European Jews, to be saved from the terrible regime of the Tsar, that he agreed with the British government that it would be good to open a Jewish homeland in Uganda. And that's when the Zionist movement split. And people like Ben Gurion and Weizmann said, we're never going to Uganda. It's Israel or it's Palestine, nowhere. And so the Zionist movement split between those who would have had a homeland at any cost and those who only wanted a homeland in the original place of the Jewish homeland in the state of Israel. So Herzl was very disappointed, and basically he lost ground, he lost popularity, although he had been considered a real saint in the eyes of the persecuted Eastern European population, Jewish population. And eventually, although he died in Vienna in 1904, before the First World War, his remains were transferred to Jerusalem, to what is now Har Herzl, the mountain of Herzl in Jerusalem. And if you've been there, you'll know that it's the military cemetery, and all of the prime ministers and all of the founders of the state of Israel are buried there. So he is considered a VIP, even in the land of Israel, despite the fact that he would have probably abandoned it had he had his way. Let's see, who else do we have? Famous Viennese Jews. Mahler. I think Judy and Marty can tell us about Mahler. Tell us about Mahler. Do we know anything about his background?
Yeah, well, most important thing. Of course, he wanted to be head of the opera in Vienna. And in order to become head of the opera in Vienna, guess what he had to do? He converted. And
but he came from a simple background in, I think, Moravia.
I taught Moravia.
And but it was a religious. I think the family was fairly religious.
Yeah. He came out of the rural Jewish hinterland to come to the metropolitan Vienna, and
then he wanted to be head of the opera, and they said very simply, sorry, but you're Jewish. So,
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I
which,
think that's
which,
right.
which I
Yeah.
guess, from what I've read, happened regularly to various people who wanted to be heads of some other institutions.
Yeah.
They had to do something
Yeah.
to, give up their Judaism renounce the Judaism in order to become head of whatever institution they wanted to be in. That wasn't very, very unusual. So, yeah.
Actually, while we're talking about music, I should have mentioned one thing before that connects to CRT, which is that as the Jews in Vienna became more emancipated and religious reform started to take over, one of the most famous cantors in the Shire Temple, the synagogue that I showed you earlier, was Solomon Sulzer. Now, Sulzer is the composer of much of the High Holy Day music that we use today at CRT. And his aim was to make the music more melodic, more kind of westernized. So he took the traditional Jewish melodies or words for the High Holy Days and gave them kind of a more of a westernized feel. And that's the music we use in our services today. Sulzer was very much favored by the early reform movement all over the world, in Germany and in America. So our connection to Vienna is through Sulzer, and we still use the music that he wrote. And he was so famous as a cantor that all the famous musicians would come and listen to him. Robert Schumann, um, and all of the famous European musicians and composers would come and listen to Sulzer both sing and to his original compositions because he was so well known. Yeah, so interesting. Let's see who else. Schnitzler, the playwright, not so well known these days, but uh, still his plays are still produced. And he was also born and died in Vienna and died in the 30s. Oh, and then we have a couple of slides about the Reformed synagogue in Vienna. It's called Or Hadash, which means new light. And as you can say here, their mission is to strengthen Jewish pluralism and create an open community for all. It was founded in 1990, so not that old. It's the only progressive Jewish congregation in Austria, and it welcomes everybody, full equality for all. And the rabbi, as I said, is Rabbi Tobias Moss. He was the associate rabbi of Temple Israel in Minneapolis, and he moved to Vienna with his wife, who is a singer, and he studied at HUC.
Well, I mean, there are two people who've moved to Vienna. One is your friend from London, and this rabbi. What motivated them to move from the U.S. or from London in the U.S. to go to Vienna?
We will ask. We will ask them.
Okay.
Jonathan is in Prague, and Tobias is in Vienna.
Right.
Well, let's ask them when we see them.
Right.
Any questions, comments? Anyone been to Vienna? They want to highlight anything that they really liked. Hal has got his hand up. You need to unmute. Yeah.
It has to do with the origins of anti-Semitism. I've read a lot of history books, and it just seems it goes on and on and on. And do you have any idea how it became such a banner of life for so many people for so many centuries? Do you have any insight?
I wish I did. And you're right. And it's not only so long, but so global that every place we go to, we seem to attract the hatred of others. Maybe it's because we are the other. We're not part of the norm, but we try to be as normal as everybody else. It's complicated. Sometimes people have blamed Christianity and the teaching of Christianity for it. And that may be true, but there are certainly enough non-Christian anti-Semites as well. So what is it about us that attracts such special attention and often hatred? And I suppose that Moses's original mission was to be a special people, a goy kadol, a goy kadosh, and in some ways people have always not liked us for that.
Yeah.
But I can't give you a full answer, obviously.
Yeah, I think speaking from the other side of the row a little bit, I think the way some of the New Testament scriptures were translated that basically say in black and white the Jews killed Jesus. Whether you're, a practicing Christian or not, that's kind of a bad taste in people's mouths. I just wanted to share one thing about a series that I watched on, I can't remember if it was Acorn or BritBox, but it's called Vienna Blood. And
Yeah.
if you got like a good murder mystery, it's real. Wouldn't you say it's really excellent at communicating this sort of accepted, not really accepted kind of thing with the Jews in Vienna? I just, yeah.
Put it in the chat, BK, and we'll all have a look.
Okay. Yeah.
Bob, yeah.
I wonder, was there a problem that the Jews were being exclusive, were segregating themselves from the society, were not intermarrying, and could have been perceived as annoying that way?
Yeah. Well, I think you can always put the case, and then you can put the exemption, the opposite. So, for instance, where where Jews were accused of separating themselves from general society, there was anti-Semitism. But then when Jews integrated into general society, there was anti-Semitism. So both cases are true. So does that mean that we should not separate ourselves, even though that hasn't made a difference? I mean, look at
that wasn't the direction I was going in. I'm just trying to understand actually the question Hal was raising, which is, where does that come from?
Yeah. We're all asking that question, and it's complicated. Remember, Jews were sometimes persecuted for economic reasons, like in England, when we talked about that in Oxford, that they were expelled for what was called clipping the coinage. That was kind of taking silver off coins. That was the reason that was given. But we also know that the barons didn't want to pay the debts they owed to the Jews, so that's an economic reason. Other places you have a religious reason, like say in medieval Spain, where Jews were expelled because they didn't want a Jewish community in a new Christian world. And then you'll have racial reasons. The Nazis, they hated all Jews. It doesn't matter if you were intermarried or whatever you were, if you were black, white, or green. You were a Jew and you were on the train to Auschwitz. So this phenomenon of anti-Semitism is an extraordinarily difficult phenomenon to explain, and many books have been written about it, and I don't think we can answer that one tonight. We'll have Carol there.
Okay, I have 2 points. One is there's a movie called Max, which is about basically Hitler when he was a young art student and was rejected by this guy, a wealthy young art dealer, because his art wasn't good enough for the art world, and he resented that early on. So that, I mean, whether it's true or not true, it's just sort of an interesting tale, sort of as a backdrop to how he later developed his hatred.
Of course, and he grew up in Vienna.
Right, exactly. So this is all about a Viennese art dealer who's Jewish, and ostensibly Hitler as an art student who wasn't making it. And then the other thing was in the books. I've now finally finished all 3 books, thank God. And in at the end of the Stefan Zweig book, he talks about the assimilation of all Jews across, no matter where they came from, the ones that actually made it out and ended up in London, and he's seeing them And he said he's commenting that they don't have a connection to each other because for so long they connected to others. I thought it was a very interesting point. Anyway, 2 points.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, very interesting. The community I grew up in had a number of Viennese Jews in England, and they, as you say, they were not the German Jews very much formed a group in my hometown, and my parents were part and grandparents were part of that. But the Viennese Jews kind of kept themselves to themselves. You're right. Interesting.
My great-grandmother was from Vienna, and my great-grandfather was from Budapest. And they lived in Yorkville in a German community in the Upper East Side. So it just sort of, I didn't know them, and they were long gone, but that was sort of the backdrop. Yeah.
Gail.
A lot of my ancestors were Quaker going back hundreds of years. And there's some similarities. First, they were massively discriminated against, including for many years, no Quakers were allowed into New York. And there's a couple of similarities. Strict, no intermarriage, very strict community. And also, and this might be it, and we're seeing some of this now today, a fear and contempt for learning by the outsiders. And both of those communities held learning and scholarship in great esteem.
Right, exactly. Any other comments? People who've been to Vienna, your favorite place to go, or whether you have experience of being in any of the Jewish institutions there? Carol, back to you.
Yeah, I've been in Vienna 2 or 3 times, and I never went to the Jewish Quarter. That was not on my agenda. I went to the Albertina, and I went to see Klimt's house, and or Sheila's, or went to see the art, but no, so just interesting.
Hal, yeah.
I've been to Vienna multiple times as well, and having gone through the Jewish Quarter, it's really quite austere, and you really didn't even know that you were in the Jewish Quarter. There was nothing there. A couple signs.
Yeah.
It'll be very different, Prague and Vienna, and we'll have to meet our expectations and remember this little bit of history to know what's happening. It won't be the same. Prague will be full of synagogues, full of Jewish life in the Jewish Quarter, and there's lots going on, and people are quite proud of the Jewish heritage and legacy. In Vienna, it'll be different, and we'll have to manage that expectation. So, but we're also going to enjoy and celebrate the fact that Viennese Jews gave so much to the world and to Vienna. And that's, for me, whenever I go to these places, whether it's Berlin or Vienna or any of these capitals of the world, I know how much the Jews contributed, and they may not be there now, but they have a legacy that we're going to look at and talk about. So let's talk about the trip a little bit, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm going to go through the schedule. Everyone will get a copy of this so you can have it, but there will be kind of a more detailed program that will come to you just before the trip, in which it'll have all the where we're meeting, what time things are. This is just what we might call the skeleton of the schedule, but the whole thing will come to you in full form a little later on. So Marsha and I will be leading you. As you know, we're leaving, a group of us are leaving on a plane together from Boston on Monday night, the 6th of October. That day happens to be the first day of Sukkot. Sorry, that happens to be Erev Sukkot, the evening of Sukkot. So we arrive on the first day of Sukkot, and we arrive first of all in Vienna, and then we transfer to Prague by plane, and we arrive in Prague around 10 o'clock, 10:30 in the morning of the 7th of October. Now, there's a bus for us that's going to be waiting for us, and anyone else who is not on our flight, but who can get to that airport by, say 11 o'clock in the morning, will be able to join us on the bus. And I know a few people are going to do that, and some people will just go straight to the hotel. So we'll get transferred to the hotel. Now, on the Sunday, the 12th of October, we're obviously leaving Prague in the morning. We're going by bus by coach to Vienna. It's about a 4-hour trip.
Rabbi,
So
we had talked about going, or you had mentioned going by train originally. No, I mean I love that idea, but
I love
what?
that idea
You just
too.
go do that because I'm thrilled we're going on a bus.
I wanted
Oh,
I wanted to do that, but a group of 24 people with all their luggage,
mhm.
by going from the hotel to the station to the next station, the station to the hotel was just too much. So we decided we're going to make it easy. We'll be door to door by bus, and everyone's bags will be in the bottom of the bus, and we won't have to schlep them. Um, but thank you for mentioning that, and we'll talk about that on the way on the bus, what it would have been like to be on the train in those days. And then Vienna, we will depart, as we know, on Wednesday the 15th, and we're departing by plane from Vienna Airport, and we'll have a bus to take us from the hotel to the airport, obviously early in the morning, so we get back to Boston later on that day. So here, day by day, as I say, a general skeleton schedule. We arrive on the 7th. Now, it may not be that our rooms will be ready, and we are therefore going to deposit our bags at the hotel, but we may not be able to get into our rooms. As I think I said earlier, Mr. Jonathan Woodcliffe, who is a friend of mine from London, who is a businessman and lives in Prague most of the year, will be meeting us, and he, as a resident of Prague, will take us on a general walking tour of his city, and we will walk across the Charles Bridge, we'll go up to the castle, and we'll probably all be quite tired, but at least that'll keep us awake. And we'll have an early supper at a brewery, a light supper at a brewery in the evening, and then we'll crash into our beds. So that will be our first day, pretty light, but also opportunity just to get some fresh air, walk around, see the city, see where we are in context of the rest of the city. And of course, if your room is ready and you want to crash, you can do that too, and maybe join us wherever we are. Our WhatsApp group that we've talked about before will be active, so we'll always tell people, we're at this cafe or we're on this bridge, if you want to join us wherever we are. Wednesday, which is the second day of Sukkot, and therefore a Jewish holiday, and therefore we're going out of town because nothing will be open, no Jewish sites will be open in Prague. We're going to take a day out. We're going to take a bus to Theresienstadt, which is a concentration camp. It's about an hour and a half bus trip out of Prague. We're going to be led by a guide. His name is David Strauss. Sorry, David. Yeah, David Strauss. That is incorrect what it says there, David Krauss. David Strauss will lead us on this tour. He is a founder member of the Reform congregation uh, in Prague. We'll be out the whole day, so bring what you need. I'll mention that on the bigger schedule that you'll be getting. We will go to Theresian. We'll spend the morning in Theresian. We'll look at the camp compound, which was actually a small city, and very unusually for all of these concentration camps, it was actually organized by the Jewish community. It was not led by Nazis. The Nazis were on the outside of the compound. They had a camp there, but the Nazis were not inside the camp compound, and we'll learn all about that. There's a Jewish museum there, and we'll participate in viewing that. And also there is a very small, what's called a secret synagogue. And when we go to the synagogue, we will say prayers for those who were there and died. We will also leave Theresienstadt around lunchtime. We'll get some lunch, and we will go to another place, one of the rural synagogues in Bohemia. We're looking at Ushtek at the moment, but we have to see if it's going to be open on the second day of Sukkot. These synagogues are mostly empty. They've been refurbished by the Czech government, and they're mostly museums. They're not active synagogues except for some few. So we're looking at one where we can, have the opportunity to go inside and see it. And David's going to take us on that. We'll come back in the afternoon from our bus trip, and that evening we will have a beautiful dinner, Mediterranean dinner at the Turquoise restaurant, which has been highly recommended. And that's on us. We're taking you out for dinner. And then we feel that although people will be tired, we want to have some reflection on the day, particularly because we've been in a concentration camp. So there will be a late night reflection session. If you want to join us, please do. And if you feel it's too much, then you don't have to. That'll probably be around 9 o'clock, and we'll have to find a room in the hotel to do that. On the Thursday, we will then kind of delve into medieval Prague. So we're kind of going backwards in time. We will look at the museum and the synagogues. As I think I said before, the museum are the synagogues. So the synagogues of Prague make up the Jewish Museum, and inside those synagogues are the exhibits. So we'll be going around the synagogues. It's like a walking tour. It's not like a museum that's one building. We're going to be led by the Director of Education and Culture, Dr. Susanna Pawlowska. She will be taking us on this tour, and then she's agreed to sit down with us at lunch and talk to us about her experience of what's happening with the museum, with its collection. We'll talk about the Torah scrolls that I've talked about before, and the other artifacts that we'll learn about, and some of the strange stories about the museum that were particularly interesting during the communist period and up to today. Of course, the Jewish Museum includes the cemetery, the famous Jewish cemetery we looked at last time, and we'll have time to wander in the afternoon to do some of our own looking and learning, and we can go back into the Jewish Museum and look at things we didn't get a chance to look at. In the evening, again, we're going to have dinner together. We're going to the Jewish restaurant, the King Solomon restaurant, and we'll have a typical Jewish evening meal with good old borscht and chicken soup and everything else that's Czech and Jewish. And I think we'll have an interesting, nice, colourful evening in the Jewish restaurant there. Friday morning is free. You'll be pleased to hear. Anyone who wants to go shopping, that's your time to do anything you need to do. In the afternoon, we're going to meet the Reform Rabbi, Rabbi David Maxa. David is going to talk to us about the Jewish community, the Reform Jewish community in Prague. And we're going to meet at the community center where the Reform congregation meets. And I think we saw a picture of that last time. Now, that's in the afternoon. In the evening, we're going to have Shabbat services, but we're not going to the Reform synagogue for the services because I think, as I said last time, very, very occasionally, they open up one of the beautiful 19th century synagogues for the Reform community to use. And David has applied to use it for that evening in our honor. So we will be in this gorgeous Spanish synagogue for Friday night services. And there is going to be an oneg afterwards, a kiddush in our honor afterwards. And I'm told that kiddush is big enough to call it dinner. So it will be, save your appetite. We'll begin having basically dinner after services with the community and get to know them and meet them and be part of the congregation for that evening. It is, of course, the Shabbat in Sukkot, so I'm hoping we'll get into the Sukkah, we'll wave the Lulav and Etrog, and we'll be part of their Sukkot celebrations. On Saturday morning, Jonathan Whitcliffe, my friend from London, has invited us all to his home. Apparently, he has a rooftop view of the whole city. So we'll be all on his rooftop with his sukkah, and he's inviting members of the congregation as well. So we'll have a large gathering, and he's also offering us a kiddush as part of the morning. We won't necessarily do a service unless anybody wants one. We will certainly sing some songs, and we'll talk about Sukkot and do some blessings. But I don't think we're going to do a full service that morning. The afternoon is free, and we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful evening. We're going to the Opera House, to the State Opera House, to see Verdi's Nabucco, which includes the Song of the Israelite Slaves, set in Babylonia, and all about Jewish exile. So very appropriate. And that tickets have been bought, and we're all sitting in the orchestra for that wonderful performance. I don't know why it says 5 o'clock for the Opera House. Again, I think that's incorrect. It must say 7 o'clock. We're going to meet for the Nabucco. So the next morning, very early, we'll take our train, 8:30. Sorry, our bus. Sorry, Jennifer. Our bus to Vienna, and we'll probably get there in the afternoon, early afternoon. I'm sure that we'll stop for lunch on the way, or we'll have a packed lunch from the hotel. We'll work that out. And the afternoon will be open for museums, palaces. We'll be quite near the tourist center, as I said. So our hotel is right there, and you can just walk over to any of the museums, the Belvedere, the Schlossberg Castle, anything that your heart fancies, and enjoy the afternoon and the evening. Whenever it says dinner on your own, the suggestion is that we gather in small groups and then we invite each other out for dinner, so that no one's left on their own. It's hard to cater for 24 people. So the nights where we have booked and reserved and paid for dinners, that's for the whole group. Where we haven't done that, we're going to invite you to find a restaurant locally. You can talk to the concierge in the hotel, or we'll provide some recommendations, and go in small groups and get to know each other. And maybe if you've had dinner with one group one night, have dinner with some other people the next night. So we'll all spread the joy around. On Monday morning, we're going to start early with Annalie Pichler. She is a Jewish guide for Vienna, also a member of the community, the Reform community in Vienna. And she will be taking us, first of all, on a kind of more of a general tour, and then the Leopoldstadt, the Jewish tour as well. We will be using public transport in Vienna. I'll be buying everybody a 3-day pass to use public transport, which means you can use it anytime, all the time. And we will jump on and off the trains and the tubes, in the trams, in order to get round. And Annalie will lead us on those tours, so we will have to keep up with her, jump on a tram when she tells us to, and then jump off when she tells us to. So be with us, don't get lost on the Ringstrasse. And again, the WhatsApp group will always you'll always be able to find us if somehow you get missing. In the afternoon, we'll be free, but we're going to have a wonderful evening of Vivaldi at the Karlkirche, which is the church where Vivaldi is buried. As you may know, he was buried as a pauper, so he was buried in the kind of non-consecrated ground that the Karlkirche is located on, and that's at 8:15. So come ready for a wonderful concert. The Karlskirche is not so far from our hotel. Tuesday is Simchat Torah. We will be jumping on the tram and going up to the Reform Synagogue in the Jewish Quarter, and we will have services in the morning with Rabbi Tobias. Tobias is the rabbi of the Reform Synagogue in Vienna, but he actually was in Minneapolis for many years. He was the assistant rabbi in Minneapolis. So we'll have a connection there. In the afternoon, after Kiddush, and dancing for Simchat Torah. I'm not exactly sure what they do for Simchat Torah in the morning of Simchat Torah, but at some point we will have to leave whatever celebration they're having, because we're having a walking tour of the Jewish Quarter, the second half of the walking tour, which is going to take us to some of the baronial manors where the Oppenheimers and the Rothschilds lived, and we're going to see some of those houses and homes. We'll be doing that in the afternoon. And then in the evening, we're having our grand celebration dinner in a castle. We're going to be in a restaurant that is an 18th century Baroque restaurant. We have a private room, and we are going to have a wonderful evening meal that has all been pre-ordered and sounds wonderful. I think we're even going to have musicians. I'm not sure what else is going to be provided. And that is our final evening. I must say that day is rather full. If you feel like it might be a bit too much, you might want to, if you're going to skip anything, I would just skip maybe Simchat Torah morning service. I know as a rabbi I shouldn't say that, but the afternoon will be, it'll be walking around, a lot of walking, and then if you want to get back to the hotel quickly and change for dinner, you'll have to fit all that in. So be aware that that's a long day. Our last day will be a long, full day. And then, sadly, Wednesday morning, we have to leave very early. Our bus will be waiting for us, and we will go to the airport and fly. And I'm hoping there'll be no delays, there'll be no problems with any of our transportation, and that everything will go smoothly, and we'll be back safe and sound on the 15th. Now, happy to answer any questions. And as I say, everyone will get a copy of this, as well as a more detailed piece of programming just before we leave.
I'd like to go back to that original book list that you sent, because I'm not sure what I did with it.
Yes, I have it on the PowerPoint. Again, everyone will get a copy of the PowerPoint. We had a number of books recommended by our guides for Prague and Vienna. I have the Vienna ones here. Let me just take this down and put this back up. There were, as Jennifer said, I think there were 3 books.
Bill, did we update the web page at all for the Vienna books?
We'll put it on the web page, yeah.
Well, Gail's book group is reading one of them, right?
Reading Vienna, or the Cockett book. We're reading for book group before we go.
All right, Michael, if you'll send it to me, I'll make sure that we.
Yeah, I think it's up B, but we can check.
Okay, all right. Happy new computer.
There we go. So Stefan Zweig's The World of Yesterday, Memoirs, Vienna. Edmund de Waal, The Hare with the Amber Eyes, which is a novel, wonderful novel about a family from Vienna. This book by Richard Crockett, that's the book for the book club, How the City of Ideas Created the Modern World. I mean, it's not only about Jews, Jews are included, but we learn a lot about Red Vienna, which are all the socialists and the communists. We learn about a woman who became the mother or the grandmother of advertising for Madison Avenue. If you ever watched Mad Men, there's a Viennese woman in Mad Men who advises them, and she's based on this woman who was real from Vienna, who invented basically the world of kind of statistical advertising and how to how to understand what we now call an algorithm. She was the person who kind of invented that concept that you could follow the target audience with statistics. And another Stefan Zweig story. But we have some in the chat as well that came in today from various people. If you know of something that we should all watch about Vienna, whether it's about Jews or Vienna in general, please put it in the chat, and we should all look at it. There is, of course, a movie about. Oh no, I'm thinking of Prague now. I'm thinking of the murder of Heydrich that was set in Prague. That was always a very powerful movie. The assassination of Heydrich, who was the German Gauleiter, the protector of Prague. Remember, Czechoslovakia was a protectorate under the Nazis. It was never annexed. It was considered a separate country and was allowed to kind of do its own thing, much like some parts of France. But Austria was annexed, so it was considered part of the Reich, the Third Reich, and was all the laws that pertained to German Jews pertained to Austrian Jews. Let me stop that. Wonderful. Questions or comments either about Vienna, or Prague, or the tour in general? Any requests you have? We have culture, we have music, we have theatre, we have opera, we have synagogues and museums, talks, meeting with local people. If there's anything else that I haven't thought of.
Seems amazing, Rabbi.
Yeah.
It's great.
Very
Great.
nice. Very nice.
It's an absolutely
David.
amazing trip. It sounds wonderful. I was only thinking, I don't know, we probably won't have room for it. There's some wonderful art too.
Well, I think
Rabbi, you have some slides about Freud, and I'm just reminding you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I do. Thank you. Well, just to say something about art. One of the free afternoons in Vienna, if you want to join me, I'll probably go to the Belvedere, which has all the Klimt art, and of course, much of that was stolen from Jewish houses in Vienna by the Nazis, and then some of them returned and some of them not. But if we want to talk about stolen Jewish art, we can do that there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Carol, you're muted.
There's a Shire house in the museum as well.
Okay. We're following you.
Also the Albertina, which is right across from our hotel.
Oh, well, maybe we'll follow you then, Carol.
Right.
Okay, I think we're coming to the end of our time. I really appreciate everyone coming along. You'll all get copies of this so you can see it again. If you know where your free time is, so if you have friends or family or other people or other things you want to do. I know that some people are joining us who will be in Europe already, and then some people are staying on afterwards. So the group will be together for the main part. And I can say that we have one addition to our merry band, and that is my son Micah will be joining us.
Oh, great.
He finished his master's degree in London this week. He handed in his thesis, and he's now going to travel through Europe, and he'll meet us in Prague when we
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Nice. Yeah, that's great.
Wish you all the best. I'm going to
Thank
see
you
you
so much.
either Shabbat Slichot, which remember is our Saturday evening service that prepares us for the High Holy Days. I invite everyone to join us for a very moving prelude to the High Holy Days. And then, of course, our Rosh Hashanah service in a few weeks' time. Thanks for all being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. It was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As usual.